Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture in the GitHub Masterclass. Today, it's a very interesting lecture because we are going to look at a hands-on activity implementing Git commands. So up till now, what we have seen is that we have a scenario in which you are an engineer who has started this machine learning project in your product team, and then you have created a GitHub repository. And in the last lecture, you also learned to download VS Code, and you have downloaded Git, and it's set up fine on your machine. And now what you want to do is that you want to write some code, and then you want to make some changes to this repository over here so that everyone else can see what you have worked on. Remember, this is the repository or the project which will be shared by all the five people who are working with you. So you want to write some code and upload it over here onto this repository so that everyone else will be able to take a look at it. So let us start understanding how to use Git along with VS Code so that this is made possible, or so that this goal is achieved. So I'm going to go to slides right now. The first thing which we are going to do is that this whole project needs to be in a demo folder. So I'm going to rename this folder as you can rename it anything, but I'm going to call it as ML project, and I'll write all of my code over here. So this folder is named as ML project right now, and it's created and it's sitting on my desktop currently. Okay. So the first step is done. The second step essentially is to add this folder to my VS Code. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to file and I'm going to click on add folder to workspace. When I click on add folder to workspace, I'm going to click on desktop and I'm going to click on this ML project over here. And then I'll click on add. So here I will click on yes. So you'll see that this ML project has been added into this VS Code file explorer. I'm going to remove the previous projects which I had over here so that you can easily visualize what is going on. So currently I do not have any code or anything present in this folder right now. This is an empty folder which I have created, but that's the first step which is needed. Great. Now let's go to the second step. The second step again is to check whether Git is installed correctly or not. So I'm going to right click here, click on open in integrated terminal, and I'm just going to type git dash dash version, and my Git version shows up which says that Git is correctly installed on my machine. Great. Then I'm going to go to the third step, which is the first Git command you are going to learn, and that is called cloning. Cloning a repository means that we want to bring the repository where it's hosted right now on this github.com slash Vijuara AI slash machine learning project, and I want to bring it onto my local machine. So we will copy this repository which exists here and make its copy on my local machine. So there are two concepts which I would like to explain to all of you over here. Those are the concepts of local and remote. Throughout this series, whenever I'm going to say remote, I mean something which is present on GitHub, on the cloud, on the website. And whenever I say local, it's going to refer to something which is present on my device, on my laptop, or on your computer, let's say. Cloning is the process of copying the contents of the repository from the remote to my local. And why do I need to do that? Because I will need to make changes on the current version of the project, right? Let's say we are in day 15 of the project. I want to make some changes. First, I'll need to clone the repository to see what other people have worked on currently, what's the current state of the project. And then I will make some changes and then I will upload my changes back again from local to remote. That will be the last step. But the first step is to bring whatever current version exists from the remote, which is github.com, to my local, which is my laptop. Okay, so I'm going to do this step right now. And the git command for this is git clone and the link to the repository. So remember here, whenever I teach you a Git command, I'll teach you the code which is associated with it. When you use GitHub desktop, you don't have to write code. But when you use Git, you will have to write code. So, for example, you understood the cloning concept, that's good. But now you need to understand the code for cloning the GitHub repository. And that's called Git clone. how does the system recognize what is Git? Because we have already installed Git before. That's why we need to install it. And what's this link over here? This link is basically this link right over here, .git. So you can get the link from here, go to the front page of your repository, click on this green button code, and you will see that there are options here: HTTPS, SSH, GitHub client, which is GitHub client. We just need to look at HTTPS right now. I think that's the most commonly used method. So when you click on HTTPS, you will see this link which appears over here. So git clone, and that's the link which we have to paste in VS Code. So copy this link over here. You can even click on this copy URL to clipboard symbol, and then go to VS Code. And then what I'm going to write here is that, okay, I need to go to my terminal again. Okay, and then what I'm going to write here is that I'm going to write git clone, and then I'm going to paste the URL, and then I'm going to press enter. So here you see it's cloning the machine learning project repository into my ML project folder. So now my ML project folder consists of this repository over here. Now I want to navigate to this folder, machine learning project. Currently, if you see, I'm on the ML project folder, which is outside. I now want to navigate to a folder within the ML project folder, and that's the machine learning project. So what I can do is I can do cd machine learning project. What this will do is that this will bring me into this folder, and it will show me what all exists in this folder. So the next step for you is that you will need to see what all exists in this folder currently. Okay, so the way to do that is that, oops, let me go to terminal. So I want to see what all files exist in my folder. So you can type ls gives you the list of files which exists in this folder, and you will see that there are two files, readme.md and add.py, these two files. And those are the exactly the same two files which we have seen over here. Okay, um, which shows that we have correctly brought this project from the website to our local repository. Now I'm going to show one more thing which might seem like magic. So if you type ls and types -a, you will see that now along with this readme and add.py, you have other files also. Especially I want you to focus on this .git. So ls-a actually lists out the hidden files as well. When you just type ls, it only shows the non-hidden files. But when you type ls-a, you see all the hidden files as well. And .git is one of the hidden files. .git means that Git is actively tracking this project. To make the concept easier, think of Git as a person who is managing this project all virtually. So Git knows that we are working on this project right now, and Git knows that these are the files in our project. So whenever you want to see whether a project is being tracked by Git or not, one way to do it is type ls-a, because ls also shows you the hidden files. And I've also mentioned this in my Canva presentation. Um, okay, after we clone the Git repository from the remote to the local, we have set up this project folder inside our main folder, and I just showed you two commands, which is ls and the ls dot dash a. ls dash a shows all the files including the hidden files. The next thing is that I want to show you git status, which is the second command which we are going to learn about. And it's as simple as typing git status, and I'll explain to you what this essentially means. So now you can see there are so many things here, right? To clear the commands in the terminal, you can type clear, and you'll see that everything just disappears, which is good. And now I want to type git status. So here you can see that we are on the branch named main, and nothing to commit, working tree clean. There are so many words here which are like, what is branch, what is tree, what is commit. That's why git is sometimes hard to learn, because there are so many terms which people don't know what it means. Right now, don't focus on any of these terms. I just want you to look at that we are up to date. The status is up to date. There is nothing to commit. Our working tree is clean, which means that all the files are being tracked by Git. There are files which can come in four types of status. And let me show you those four files. So there are four types of Git status. The first is untracked. which means that Git does not know about the file since it's not committed, it's a new file. Second is modified, which means we have two files currently, right? When we make changes in the file, it becomes a modified file. Third is unmodified, which means no change in the file. Right now, all of our files have the unmodified status. And the last thing is staged, which is file ready to be committed. Don't worry, I'll explain all of this to you. Let's start first with the modified file. So what I'm going to do right now is that currently all our files are unmodified, which means Git has clearly tracked them. What I will do now is that I will go to this add.py, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to type this is a dummy Python code. Okay. Now this I'm just typing on my laptop without any connection to Git. So Git has no way of tracking this change. And let's see whether that has been reflected in Git status. Make sure to save this file always. So now I will type Git status. Now you see there is some change, right? See, we have a modified file add.py. So now I'm showing you the second status, which is modified. Earlier, all the files were unchanged, but now Git is showing that there is one file which is modified, and that's add.py. Uh, However, these changes are not staged for commit. I'll tell you what that means, but for now, just just make a note of this, that the file has changed its status to modified. The second type we just saw about the modified file status. The second status which I want to show you is untracked. So if you go to VS Code right now, let me add another file over here, which is basically index.html. And let me, maybe we want to make a website, right? Machine learning project website. Now this is a completely new file. Git has no clue I've added this file because I added it after cloning the repository. And now first let me clear the terminal and let me type git status. When I type git status over here, you see that this add.py is modified, but still Git is tracking it because it was already tracking it and now it's modified. But there is an untracked file, and Git has not been tracking this file at all. It just came out of nowhere. Git is taken by surprise. I did not know about this file. Where did this come from? That's why it's the untracked file. So this is a modified status, untracked status. We already saw about the third status, which is unmodified, which is no changes. And then later we'll learn about this fourth status, which is staged. Before we move any further, I just want to explain a key concept to you, and this that is the concept of the staging area. You might be thinking, what is the meaning of this staged, right? Well, Git really operates with these fancy terminologies, and it's time to explain one such terminology to you now, and that's the staging area. So let's say we have a modified file such as the add.py, or let's say we have a completely new file such as the index.html. To make sure that such files are ultimately added to our GitHub repository online and are tracked by Git, we have to follow certain steps. The first step which we have to do is add these files to a staging area, which means that the files have now been added. They have not yet been recognized by Git. Git is still not tracking them permanently, but they have been added to a staging area. You can think of it as a rehearsal stage. Before going to the stage to perform, there is a backstage, right? Where you are just rehearsing. You are there for the performance, but you have not yet entered the stage for the performance. That's what it means to put a file to staging area, which means that the file has appeared backstage. uh, you have the file has not yet been tracked by Git permanently, but it is on backstage. The performance has not yet started. You have not yet gone onto the stage where the file is now permanently being tracked by Git. So modified or untracked files, you need to add the file to the staging area first. Okay. And then its status is changed to staged. That's why there's this fourth type of status which is changed, which is staged. We'll see that in a moment. Now, once the file is in the staging area, the last step is to commit the file. Commit the file is like Git takes a snapshot that, okay, I got it. I now know that this file exists. And then that file comes in the permanent record of Git. When the file is in the staging area, the Git has not taken a snapshot. Only when you commit the file, Git takes a snapshot, and now that file is in the permanent record of Git. which means that now the file is ready to be uploaded onto the GitHub repository online. These two concepts are two of the most important concepts while learning Git and GitHub. The first concept is adding the file to the staging area. The second is committing file for the permanent Git record. And these terms are so confusing, right? Add, commit, staging, etc. But think of you as going on stage for a performance. First, you go to backstage, right? That is going from some changes in the file to the staging area, and then ultimately you go to the front, to the stage when you are committed for the performance. When you know you want to perform, you have committed, then you go to the stage and then you deliver your performance. It's similarly for the files. Let's say the file is modified or untracked, you have to first add it to the staging area, then it becomes staged, then you have to commit. When you commit, that's when Git takes a snapshot. The file is now ready. It's in Git's permanent record, and now it's ready to be uploaded onto the GitHub repository online. That's the concept of the staging area, and that's where this fourth status comes, staged. We'll see about that. But this naturally brings us to the next step, which is learning about the add and the commit commands. Let's recap whatever we have learned up till now. Until now, we have learned about the git clone command, which basically brings the repository from remote to the local. Then we learned about the ls, which shows the non ls dash a, which shows the hidden files. Then we learned about the four types of Git status: untracked, modified, unmodified, and staged. We looked at untracked, modified, and unmodified files, but we were thinking, what does this staged mean? Then we looked at the staging area concept, where modified or untracked files need to be added to the staging area. Then you need to commit them for the permanent Git record. That's when Git takes the snapshot. Great. Now we come to step number 5, which is adding and committing. So you might be thinking, okay, you talked about this adding file to staging area. How do we do that? So we need to add a file, as I said. After adding, the file is staged. Then we need to commit the file, which means Git needs to take a screenshot. And after committing file, then the file is unchanged, which means that the status of the file again becomes unmodified, because now Git maintains a full track. All is good, and then Git is aware of everything what is going on and is tracking it. So first, so we'll learn about two types of commands in this step number 5. The first is git add. What this command does is that it adds new or changed files in your working directory to the Git staging area. It all has been documented here in this diagram. So if you have new files which are untracked files or even changed files, what this git add command does is that it adds new or changed files in your working directory to the Git staging area. And the command here is that git add, and we have to specify the file name. There is another type of command which is git add and just dot. What this git add dot does is that it looks at all the possible files, whether it's new file, whether it's modified file, and it adds all of them to the staging area. So by default, what I do is that I just use git add and dot. That just makes it very easy, because if you have forgotten the changes you have made in some files, it's better not to do it separately file by file. It's better to do it all by once, unless you want to add some specific file separately. So let's go to VS Code right now and perform the add operation. So let's look at git status again. Okay, so when we look at git status, we see that one file is modified, that's add.py, and one file is untracked, that's index.html. Okay, we are fine with that. Now let's add both of these files to the staging area. So I'm going to do git add. So I can either do git add.py and then do the same thing for index.html, or as I mentioned, I can do git add dot. This one command will add both of these files, the untracked file and the modified file to the staging area, and then I'll press enter. So you see, Git does not show any message here, but I hope the file has been added to the staging area. We can check this by typing git status. See, now you can see that changes to be committed, which means that these both files have been added to the staging area. Modified file add.py and the new file. They have not yet been committed because it shows that changes to be committed, which means these files are not yet committed, which is the last step. Git has not yet taken a snapshot. Until now, the files have just been staged. The files have been added from our working directory to the staging area. Great. Now let's come to the second command in this step, and that is actually git commit. This is the command through which it's the permanent record of change. Git creates a snapshot and a permanent record is created for the change which you have implemented. So the code for this command is git commit dash m and the message. So why do we have to write a message over here? The reason we have to write a message is that later we are going to upload these files on the GitHub repository online, right? And you're making some changes over here. So if the other developer or if the other team member wants to quickly understand what you have changed, that is this message over here. To give you a simple example, if you I've already so if you see this, whenever some file has been added, you get this small message over here, right? So that quickly you can see what someone has changed. That's essentially this git commit message. And here you have to write thoughtful messages, not like what I have written right now. I have just written it for demonstration purposes. You have to write a simple thoughtful message about what you have changed and the simple reason or explanation. Just one sentence, maybe 6 or 7 words, explaining the commit. But I hope you understand what a commit is. If you ever forget what a commit is, just think about it as taking a photo, taking a snapshot, and now this change or this file is in the permanent record of Git. So let's do that here. So I'm going to again put clear and I'm going to write git commit, and the message I am putting is changed add a file, or rather I should say changed add.py and index.html, and I'll press enter. So here you can see Git mentions the changes such as changed add.py and index.html file, and you can see that two files have been changed with 6 insertions and one deletion. Great. Now let me again check the Git status. Now you see Git status, everything is unchanged, which means that there is nothing to modify. Git is now keeping track of all the files which are there. So no file is modified, no file is untracked, no file is staged because everything is now committed. Git, all the files are unchanged now. Git is tracking all of them. Git is aware of all of the changes and all of the new files as well. Awesome. However, all of these changes are still in my computer, right? I have made the changes in the files, but they are in my computer. I want all the other developers on my team. I want all of the other team members to essentially see these changes, what I've worked on. That's the whole point of this collaboration. So there is one last step which is missing, and that last step is called as the push command. So until now, we have added files to the staging area, we have committed the files, and a permanent record has been maintained by Git. But all of these files are still in my local machine. I want to upload local to remote. So let's look at this diagram again. Git clone, Git clone is from remote to local, right? Git push is from local to remote. I want to upload the changes from my local laptop to the GitHub website. So I want to upload the changes from my local to the remote, and that's where git push comes into the picture. So git push uploads the local repository content to remote repository. Whenever people say repository, the common slang is to use repo. It's a short form for repository. Okay, so what's the code for this? The code for this is git push origin main. You might be thinking what this main is. So it's the name of the branch which we are on currently. We are on the main branch currently. So if you go to Visuara AI, and if you see here, we are on the main branch currently. We have not yet created different branches, which we are going to look at later in the next set of videos. What this code essentially specifies is that you can push the changes from your local to the remote, and when you push it to the remote, you have to push it to the branch called main. You can change the name to anything here based on the branch which you have created, but we just have one branch here currently, which is the main branch where all the code is there, all the main code is there, and you are directly here pushing the changes to the main branch. Usually what people do is that if they are working on their own and they don't want to contaminate the main repository, or they don't want to change the main repository, they just create a branch and then they push the changes to their branch. This makes sure that the main code is not touched. Someone else can review the branch which they have created and then maybe later change the main code. Uh, so yeah, this is git push origin main, which pushes changes from local to the remote and in the branch named main. So let's see this actually. So this is the last step now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type git push origin main, um, and git will ask you to maybe put a password here. But after this is done, you will see that your changes are pushed from your local uh, to the remote. And here you can see that enumerating objects, counting objects, delta compression, compressing objects, writing objects. When if you get this message, this indicates that your push has been successful. And now what you can do is that you can actually go to the website to see whether the changes have been reflected or not. So I have refreshed this right now and see. First of all, I see the commit message changed add.py and index.html. Index.html file was not there before, but I've added it right now. So it's appearing over here. If I click over here, I can see the code is exactly the same as what I had added. And if I go to add.py, you will see that here also this change has been reflected. This is a dummy Python code. And the commit message for both of these files, changed add.py and index.html, changed add.py and index.html, appears here. Now you see the disadvantages of using the git add dot command. The same commit messages appeared for both files. If you want different commit messages for each files, which is sometimes very convenient, you need to add every file separately. And then what you can do is that you can add a separate commit message for each file. That also is possible. Actually, adding files together can be done with just git add dot, but then in the commit message, you will need to write separate commit messages for each file. Okay, now I also want to show a couple of things here. Now, if someone else on your team wants to see the changes which you have done, what they can do is they can click on uh, this thing where the commit message has been written. They can click on this and they can clearly see the additions and the subtraction. So they can see that all of this is the new thing which you have added, and they can see that this is the new file. This whole file is new which you have added. So they can even write a comment over here. The file additions look good. So see, now you don't have to use email communication or anything. Everything can happen in this one interface. And then you can also comment on this commit. So Visuara AI. So I am commenting on my commit itself, but other team members can also comment over here. Awesome. So here you can also see the timing. So here you can see Visuara AI committed 6 minutes ago. So Git, who is the virtual person tracking everything what you're doing, also has a history of who has committed what changes, uh, and it also has the history of the different branches where people have been working on. We have not yet seen branches, but we will come to that in one of the subsequent lectures. Okay, so in this lecture, we have ultimately implemented the bridge between Git and GitHub. And that bridge actually happens through the command line interface or the VS Code terminal interface over here and through a bunch of Git commands. Let's revise the Git commands which we have seen up till now. The first Git command which we saw is git status. The first git command which we saw is git clone, and then we have to mention the link over here. The second git command which we saw is git status, and there are four types of git status. So currently the git status is unchanged, but it can also be modified. It can be staged, and another status is untracked. So if you make changes in the file git already is tracking, it will be modified. If you add a fully new file, it will be untracked. Both of these types, modified and untracked, needs to then go into the staging area. To do that, you will need to add this command such as git add dot. This will put the changes into the staging area, and then you will need to commit. So then you will need to type git commit, and then you can add the commit message over here. And then the last command which we learned is git push origin main. What this command will do is that it will push changes from your local repository into the remote repository branch named main. These are the most basic git commands which will be useful for all the GitHub projects which you will work on. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture and you understood the git commands. In the next lecture, what we'll be doing is that, let's say if you don't start from the GitHub website, Let's say if you start on a local project, how to convert it into a GitHub project and how to convert it into a repository. I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.